Fantastic. So we're now recording. As mentioned earlier, today we're going to be talking about InDesign. We're going to introduce you to the software. And I've got a bit of an agenda that I would like to propose. So to do that, I will share my desktop and simply minimize this application. So what I've got as an intro to InDesign is essentially how you will be using the software as interior designers. InDesign is a very powerful platform, and essentially we will only be scratching the surface in its application as interior designers. It's worth noting that if you were to work in a different sort of environment, such as a graphic designer, either putting together magazines or any sort of alternative application, InDesign will allow you to do all this and beyond, right? There's a range of creatives that use the platform, and essentially what we're going to be covering is what that means in the context of interior designers. As mentioned previously, we do have access to lynda.com, and if you want a full run through the interface itself, I would highly recommend that you click on that link that will send you to the lynda.com Adobe InDesign tutorials. If you haven't done that yet, my recommendation is to do it sooner than later and to complete the course completely. That will give you a certificate of completion, and that's something that you'll be able to leverage as micro credentials either on your LinkedIn profile or simply on your resume. What we're also going to be talking about is file management as well as backup strategies. There's a couple of things that seems fairly obvious to some, that said will save your life if your computer was to crash, and if for whatever reason you were to lose your file. So we're going to be exploring what best practice looks like, whether you're working as an individual or in a design firm itself. And the rest will be us jumping and using the platform, creating a document, placing a range of images, putting some text in, and finally saving and sharing our document. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do here is go back to my internet browser. I'm currently in Creative Theory week 6. Under that section, there's a range of resources that look at interior design concepts, as well as Camper, which is a shoe company. There's examples of the actual store here and a link to their Instagram account. This is exactly what we're going to be using here in order to put a small presentation together. In your own time, whilst practicing at a later stage, feel free to use the same link. If not, if you have a project that you're currently working on, use that as an opportunity to bring something to life. We're not going to be focusing on the layout too much today. It's more so the tools that will allow you to bring that layout together. And I'm going to be saving some of those images here to help me bring a presentation to life. So the first thing that I'm going to do, and I would recommend you do that at a later stage as well, is save at least 5 images. Don't just pick rectangular sort of images. Perhaps pick a few of those diagrams, either it's a floor plan or something else, or an elevation, that will give you a variety of images to play with for your presentation at a later stage. How do we save these? Simply right-click on the image itself and select Save Image As. Now, it's important to note that the resolution will be based on what was originally uploaded to that website. So there's no real quality assurance here when it comes to the resolution of these images. In previous sessions, we looked at using Google Images in order to save high resolution images. Again, this is just for example purposes. We're not going to be creating a presentation that will go on a billboard as we progress in the course, we'll be looking at more higher resolution type of outcomes. So nothing here, everything by default. I'm going to click on my desktop, and as you may have noticed, I'm using a Mac. I'm going to click on new folder here and type in InDesign workshop. You can rename your folder as you see fit. And I'm simply going to use the images as captured by default and save them in that folder. So I'm going to do that with all the images that I want to use. Save image as, making sure here that I'm selecting the same folder just in case. There we go. So that's 3 out of 5, maybe 2 extra kind of images, maybe that elevation here, and here we go. Now, if I was to open my Finder, here's my InDesign folder, and here are my images. So if you were to use a PC, it's literally the same thing. You can right-click on those images and save them to any folder of your choice. Now, when it comes to file management and backup, my recommendation is for each and every of the projects you're working on, try to have a folder structure that will help you in a consistent manner locate your documents. Now, hypothetically, if we were to work on a project with an address such as, I don't know, Melbourne Central Campus, as an example. You can even have a date at the beginning. So 2019, what's today? 15th. So this is a recommended way to, in fact, create your folder structure. You start with the year, the month, and the day. And if you have a range of different folders on your computer, essentially you'll be able to sort that in chronological order. So this may be referred to as your parent folder. Some organizations tend to substitute the actual date with a project number. So depending on the organization that you're working for or with, or depending on whether that's your own way of organizing your files, it's up to you. Now, if you were to double click on that folder, here is an opportunity for you to have a variety of subfolders. Subfolders here could be job folder, as an example, where you have all your schedules, all your relevant information, things that you'll be learning in other subjects further down the track. Notice I've added a 00 in front of that folder name. If you were to do the same thing, 01, and say, I don't know, presentations, zero two, zero three, I don't know. And the list can go on, right? Essentially, what this allows you to do, again, is to sort your folders in chronological order. So my recommendation is 00 perhaps should be where everything lives. You know, I personally tend to have 00 for job folder, and you can just add information to that as you see fit. Your job folder may have site photos and all these sort of things. Now, since we're working on InDesign, I'm going to go back and I'm going to bring all those images to my InDesign folder. Here we go. I can, if I want to create another subfolder here to say raw images, that's usually the term used for images that haven't been necessarily photoshopped or modified. And if I was to go back and I have my parent folder, Campus Tour Melbourne Central, a series of subfolders, and essentially one that relates to InDesign itself, and additional images in there. Now, it's up to you to have your own folder structure. The beauty of that is if you were to do a backup, you can very easily identify what folder you may want to copy and essentially do your backups accordingly. Now, what's recommended is to have your documents saved in 3 locations. So say, for instance, if you're working from your respective computers, that will be defined as the first location. The second location could be either on a hard drive or a USB stick. And people that are slightly paranoid tends to keep those in a different physical location. So say, for instance, if you're working in an office environment, your backup hard drives and collaterals may be somewhere completely different. Meaning if the building was to catch fire, as an example, or for whatever reason the building was to be compromised, you'll still be able to access that information in a different way. Another way that's now more than ever being used by design firms and firms around the world is to have either a server on the cloud or simply your information on the cloud. Now, if you're not working in an organization, forget about the idea of a server. Simply use your Gmail account as an example and upload your folders to Google Drive. If you have an Outlook account, you can do the same thing with OneDrive. Essentially, there's no point reinventing the wheel. Just simply drag and drop your information to the cloud. Other alternatives will be Dropbox or other paid sort of services. I'll let you decide what you want to use. Now, just going back to working in a design firm or setting up your own business, it may be worthwhile looking at investing in a server simply because that will allow you to have different people work on the same document at the same time without necessarily any sort of constraints. As you progress in the course, you will be learning Revit, which is a CAD or drafting kind of software that allows you to have more than 100 people working on the same document, on the same building at the same time, irrelevant of their geographic location. So you can do the same thing with InDesign, you can do the same thing with Photoshop. You just need to have an appropriate structure to support you. Do we have any questions so far? We're happy for me to go and open the software. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to click on InDesign. If you're using a Mac and it's not on your actual dock, or if you're using a PC and you can't find the actual software from your desktop, what you can do is simply click on Applications or Program Files, and you can simply look for the software that you want to use and drag those software to your dock. So that will be your actual shortcuts. You can do the same thing if you're using a PC. You can create a shortcut from your Applications or Program Files folder. I'm going to click on that icon here, which refers to InDesign ID. Just since we're looking at those icons, AI is Illustrator, PS is Photoshop, and PR is Premiere. Premiere allows you to bring videos to life. It's if you want iMovie or QuickTime on steroids. Photoshop will allow you to manipulate and modify images. InDesign is primarily to put a layout together. So uploading your images, adding some text, creating the equivalent to a book or a booklet out of it. And Illustrator, as the name suggests, will allow you to illustrate different sorts of graphics. So clicking on InDesign here will essentially bring up that window indicating the version of the software itself. I'm using InDesign CC, downloaded from Creative Cloud. I should get a message here talking about my license. Here we go. I'm going to click on continue. And finally, we will land on that page. I'm just going to adjust my screen here slightly, just to make sure that we're making the most out of the real estate, and we'll give you an overview of the platform itself. So if it's the first time you're using the software on your computer, irrelevant of whether that's a PC or a Mac, and if you have a CC version, you should land on this page. Couple of things that the software will allow you to do straight off the bat is to create a new document or open an existing one. Since I haven't used InDesign on this computer yet, in fact, I've got InDesign updated on this machine earlier today, so it's a brand new version, which I'm quite happy about. I'm going to click on Create New. If you've already used InDesign previously and perhaps created a range of documents, a list of all the documents you've worked on should appear in that actual window. That would be a great shortcut for you to access the documents that you've recently worked on. Since that doesn't apply to me, I'm just going to click on Create New. Now, for those that used Photoshop before, this window should appear kind of familiar. So here, creating a new document, the software will ask you to define the size of a document. Also, it will ask you to give it a sense of whether you're going to be using it for printing purposes, whether the outcome will be viewed on the web, or simply be used on a mobile application. I'm going to select print here. And slowly but surely, I'm going to make my way to that right-hand side list of tools and settings. First, I'm going to rename my file from untitled to camper. You can have here the date. Oops. There we go. I'm going to change the units to millimeters because that's essentially the value that we use as interior designers and architects. And straight away on the left-hand side, you will see a range of different sort of predefined options. So if you're using A3, you can select it straight from here, and the same thing applies to A4 and whatnot. I'm going to change that back to millimeters. And all of a sudden, you notice that the width will change, the height will change, and you can change the orientation of your document using any of those two icons here. At the moment, that's landscape, and if you don't really know what you're looking at, you can at any point in time hover your cursor on top, and that will give you a small caption with the information you're after. Just below, you have the opportunity to create, or define, I should say, the number of pages that you want in your document. For the sake of this example, I'm just going to type in 10 for 10 pages. I'm going to leave everything else by default. Simply going to go through and explain a couple of things though. Margins will allow you to have a border if you want across your document. I'm not going to change the value, but be aware that if you want, you can define that margin by changing that value here. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and change that to 10. Since that chain link is selected, it will make all those values the same. If you were to uncheck that, you notice that the link is now broken, meaning that I could change a value without necessarily affecting everything else. So just to give you another example, I click on that chain link, and as you see, everything updated to 2 mils. Finally, that last piece here is mainly when you are actually printing your document. The bleed here refers to the area towards the end of your sheet of paper. I'm sure that you've all picked up a brochure one day where you ask yourself, how did they manage to print to the end? I hope that some people can relate to asking that question. If not, next time you pick up a brochure, try to pay attention to the corners and the fact that the print itself goes to the edge. If you were to use your own desktop printer or even the printers that we have on campus and try to achieve the same outcome, well, let me tell you that you won't be able to do so. The bleed here essentially is an overlap of where you should be cutting in relationship to your actual paper size. So if you are to print a brochure at A4, essentially if you don't have the right printer, the process will be to print it slightly bigger and then to cut the sheet of paper accordingly. So that's what the bleed essentially is for. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I'm simply going to click on create here. And if we've done everything right, we should have 10 pages at an A3 format, and the orientation should be landscape. So here we go. And essentially, that's what you should end up with. Now, you won't see your pages straight off the bat. That said, if you click on pages on the top right-hand corner, it will give you an indication of each and every of those. Now, the interface may seem slightly overwhelming at the beginning. Trust me, it's not at all. And by the way, I would recommend that you don't work from your trackpad. Just invest in one of those. You can get a very cheap, 3-button mouse from Office Work or your local post office for like $15 or something. You don't need the most fancy piece of equipment. A mouse will allow you to click on various buttons, and that's exactly what you need to do. It's not recommended to use your trackpad for a lot of time, in fact. You may end up, depending on how you sit at your desk or how you sit on your couch, with a variety of, diseases that relates to bad ergonomics and all that. So where possible, whenever you're working on InDesign or any of the software, just get a mouse. It will make your life much easier. I'm gonna, having clicked on pages here, select the zoom tool and simply hold Option. For PC users, I believe this should be Control. And you notice that the magnifying glass, more specifically the plus or minus, will change once I hold Option or Control on my keyboard. If I want to zoom out, I want to hold Option and then click. And all of a sudden, it will allow me to see the full extent of my document. Just wanted to show you a couple of things before we get to work. Having renamed my document earlier, I can now see it displayed here on the tab. If you're working with several InDesign documents at the same time, you will have additional tabs and you'll be able to navigate from one document to another. Now, this here was not saved yet, so just going to go ahead and click on File followed by Save As. That's best practice because we've just opened a brand new document. We haven't done anything. Let's make sure that we're saving it in the appropriate folder. In the process of doing that, I'm going to go and click on my desktop, followed by my InDesign folder, and I'm simply going to navigate my way to the InDesign subfolder. At this point in time, the software will allow you to select a version. You can see that I'm working from the InDesign CC 2019 document version here. If you're sharing a document with someone with a prior version, you can at any time select CS4 or later. And what that will do is it will package the file and allow anyone with perhaps a previous version open the document without any issues. Not sure whether you've ever using Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, try to share that document with someone else and receive a phone call saying, I can't open your document. Excel, Word, all the software works the same. You just need to either do a save as at a prior version, and your colleague or peer should be able to open it accordingly. They all have the same version, you should never have a problem. So having done all that, I'm going to click on Save. And essentially, if I go back to my folder now, you will see that I've got 2 additional files within my InDesign subfolder. The document that I'm currently working on has got an extension that is INDD. So this is your live InDesign file. The file that's just above it is essentially an indication that this file is open and that no one else can open it at this stage. Or if they were to double click on it, it will open a read-only document. Not really sure whether anyone ever experienced that. If you're working in a firm and there's a document on the server and 2 people are trying to work on it at the same time, you get an error message. So don't worry about this, especially if you're working on your college type of project. Just be aware that you can't delete those, especially if the file is open. And in fact, don't even try to delete anything. This is here just for, I guess, security purposes. Something that I should mention as well, InDesign, like other software, would do automatic backups as well, so that if you were to, I guess, lose some information for whatever reason, you should be able to retrieve it at a later stage. Now, not spending too much time on that, I'm going to close that window and go back to the interface itself. Now, a couple of things that I want to touch on here. Again, from the page section, you notice that we have 2 different subsections. We have what we call the masters, as well as what's underneath it, which represents a series of pages that we've created earlier. Essentially, the masters allows you to predefine things such as page numbers, or if you have like a specific template that you want to work from, you could potentially spend some time to create that template in the masters and apply it to those different pages without necessarily spending too much time doing that. So let me show you how it works. I'm going to double click on any of those masters, and I'm going to add a box here. Let's just say that this box represents, I don't know, a shape or a title block. In fact, let me add some text. Title. And if I was to zoom in a bit, you see what I've just done. I've just added a bit of text here using the text tool. So just to illustrate what that means, in fact, let me increase the size of the text. Sorry, just bear with me. I'm going to do this. Looks like my icons aren't appearing. Just bear with me. Oh, it's hidden over here. My bad. Just going to increase this window and move everyone back to here and go back to pages. Perfect. Hope you can still see my screen. Having defined that page or that section as a master, you can essentially bring that to any of the pages by simply dragging and dropping it. What that means is you should be able to apply your masters to these pages as such, and clicking on the pages themselves, first to zoom out, so option, followed by zoom out, you notice that it updated that title straight away. Now, let me give you another example. If I was to go back to masters here and change this value to new title, now I'm going to go through all the steps in a few minutes. You notice that in my layout itself, all those pages would have updated to new title accordingly. So essentially, your masters could be a way for you to put your page number, a way for you to have a title block, a way for you to have similar sort of features within your actual layout. Think about it this way. If you were to pick up your favorite magazine, I'm sure that you'll be able to identify some key features within your favorite magazine, such as perhaps the title of the magazine. Title that will be consistent, irrelevant of the page you're looking at. So that's essentially a quick way of using the tools to allow you to have those key dominators, I would say. If you were to delete this here, everything will be deleted in your other presentation. Now, I've introduced you to the magnifying tool, how to zoom in, how to zoom out. In order to pan through a document, you can hold spacebar on the keyboard, and doing that and clicking will allow you to move and pretty much work on a specific part of the document itself. The other thing that I've done, but didn't necessarily spend too much time on, was I've added some text. On the left-hand side is where all your tools currently live, and the T in that panel stands for type. If you were to click on that and draw a box, that will allow you to simply insert some text. Can't really see it because I need to zoom nice and close. And essentially, you can have a text in Word or any other software and copy and paste it in here. The other thing that you may want to look at is when you're in fact adding a lot of text, you notice that the software will allow you to modify the size of that box. So I'm just typing some random words here just to illustrate what that looks like. And I apologize if you're getting some of the background noise just with me punching through my keyboard. Let me show you one of the cool things about InDesign. So say, for instance, this is your text. At any point in time, you can click on that first arrow to select the text itself and use any of those anchors to modify the sort of dimensions that you may want to use for the text itself. And that should allow you to very quickly put a layout together. You can also, at any point in time, click on the box itself and move the text around. One of the tools that I highly recommend you explore is to, in addition to moving your text around, trying to align it with something. Earlier, we've added a 10mm border. That's a border that we can see here. You can at any time pick up your text and align it to a different direction. Change the size of that box and manipulate it as you see fit. The software also allows you to align those boxes almost effortlessly. So that's something that I would recommend you experiment with whilst you're creating your own InDesign document at a later stage. Something that I would also recommend you explore is using the rulers that you should all have by default as guide. So what you have here is the dimensions in millimeters of your sheet of paper. So an A3 sheet of paper is 297 millimeters high if it's landscape, and 420 millimeters wide, again, if it's landscape. Clicking on the ruler and dragging a line down will allow you to essentially measure any sort of dimensions that you may want to use. If you want to get rid of those grids or guides, you can click on them and hit delete on your keyboard in order to delete them. Now, hypothetically, if you have an understanding of a sort of layout you may want to use, meaning you know exactly how high and how wide that box needs to be, and hypothetically, if it was to start at 60 millimeters from that corner and 60 millimeters from this corner, about 6 centimeters, you could simply drag that box over here. If you wanted that piece of text to be to end at the 10 centimeter mark or 100 millimeters mark, you can at any time bring that in. Notice my cursor here. You have a guide through that ruler that you'll be able to use. And once you're happy with the dimensions, you'll be able to release that. If you have too much text in your actual box itself, you will end up with a plus sign. That plus sign here is an indication that not all your text fit in that box. If you ever see that, you have a couple of options. The most obvious one would be try to change the size of that actual text box, or simply try to say change your font. So smaller font will allow you to fit in more text, or as I did here, you can at any point in time increase the size of that box, either vertically or horizontally, and the red marker or error message will disappear. Now, I just want to show you two last things, at least two last things for this session. Next one is to, in fact, insert an image. To do so, you need to click on File, followed by Place. Doing that will allow you to browse for your actual folder. In my case, I'm going to select raw images and click on the image that I want to use. Same concept here. You can move those images around, and you can at any time place in additional images to your layout. I'm going to place one extra image here and show you how to manipulate those in order to change the scale and do additional things. There we go. So that's my amazing layout. Again, you can, with that arrow here, move those images to any sort of location. With that same arrow, you can increase the size of the image itself by dragging it across. If you want to retain the proportion, my recommendation would be to hold Shift on the keyboard. If you don't hold Shift, it will distort your image as such. And that's irrelevant of whether you're working on a PC or a Mac. So again, you can use the rulers in order to measure exactly where you want your images to be and simply move those using the rulers. You can use those the Shift tool alongside that side anchor to resize your images, and slowly but surely, just with those tools, you'll be able to bring a layout together. Now we're working on the first page here. If you want to work on a different page, you can at any time click on the page itself and go through the same process. So if I wanted to add an image on page 4, you can go and select File, followed by Place, select your image, and here we go. Saving your document is super easy. There's a couple of things that you can do straight off the bat. The first thing is to save this as a PDF. File, followed by export, should allow you to do this. By default, it will allow you to save it as a PDF document for printing purposes. Again, rename your file, make sure that you're using the appropriate folder, and once you're ready, click on Save. InDesign will give you a range of different options that you can play with, including security of your documents. You can add passwords, you can do a lot of things. Let's not get too excited yet. Let's simply go ahead and click on Export. That will process this information, and if I was to minimize my window here and go back to my actual original folder, you notice that in my InDesign subfolder, and I have my PDF document. Double click on it, and you will have your layout with the images on page 1 and page 4. Now, if you needed to share a working file with someone else, say if hypothetically you were to work in a team environment and share everything with one of your colleagues, InDesign allows you to very easily package your document. Oops. What does that mean? If you click on File followed by Package, the software will recognize all the assets that you've used, such as the images that we've just saved, fonts that you may have downloaded, everything in your working file, and will bring this to life in one specific folder. This may come in handy as well if you are doing any sort of backups. Now, clicking on Package here, essentially, it will prompt you to save that document, either in a similar folder. Just for the sake of this example, I'm going to create a new folder here on my desktop just to demonstrate the key differences between exporting as a PDF and packaging your file. I'm going to leave everything else by default. I'm going to rename this to packaged folder so that it's kind of obvious what we've done. And having left everything by default, you notice that it's going to copy all the fonts. It's going to copy any sort of linked graphics. These are the images that we've saved earlier. It's going to include a PDF print, and it's going to by default include an IDML file. What does this mean? This is that previous version of InDesign I've mentioned earlier. Click on Package. This may take a few minutes. Actually, it didn't take that long. I'm going to minimize my application, close this here, and navigate my way to my desktop. Here's my folder, Melbourne Central Package folder, and in here you have your working document, INDD, your PDF document, your IDML document, which is for people using a different version. And finally, if you have any specific fonts within the document, essentially the software will save it for you. And in addition to that, here are all the images that I've saved. Packaging your file is a fantastic way to complete your backups. If you're using, an external hard drive, you can straight away package your document to a specific area. Now I'm just going to touch on one last thing when it comes to images. If you were to go back to, say, your desktop, InDesign, Workshop, subfolder, raw images, and delete all those images, or even rename those images. So I'm going to throw that to my bin here. There's nothing in my folder. Notice what happens. Straight away, I will get a bunch of error messages in my document itself. First, to go back to my bin and put those images back, those will disappear straight away. The fact that we've placed those images means that if we were to, in Photoshop, change any of those, going to my desktop, InDesign files, and say open this one, and modify that image as such, and save it. Straight away, InDesign will indicate through that yellow icon here that it needs to be updated. and clicking on the icon will update it straight away. Let me do that one more time. I go here and do the same thing again. Modify that image from my very skilled artistic flair and save this. Going back to InDesign, straight away I will get a notification, and clicking on that notification will update the file. Couple of key takeaways here. One, if you have a folder structure, is to essentially organize yourself. If you were to do that straight off the bat, you'll be able to essentially work with your document without necessarily having any error messages. If you were to modify your images, it will update automatically. So picture a scenario where you're putting a client presentation together, you've got hundreds of pages, and your client tells you to go back and modify some of those. You have a right structure set up, you should be able to do that by the click of a few buttons without necessarily having to go back and place those images again. That's something that we're going to be exploring as we progress in those sessions, as we progress in this course. But essentially, what we've looked at today should allow you to, using the text tool and by drawing a box, add in some text. There we go. And using the place tool and using the folder structure that we have, you should be able to bring in an image as well. You can move that image using that arrow on the top of your panel, and by holding Shift, resize that image. You should be able to drag from the ruler some guides and use those in the process of either cropping or moving your images. And finally, to save this outcome, simply click on File, followed by Export. Essentially, this will allow you to save those documents, the PDF version of your presentation, in your actual folder. And at the very basic level, as an interior designer, this is how you're going to be using InDesign in order to bring a presentation together. I want to jump online here just to show you an example of what you may want to look at for your layouts. I'm going to open a new tab here and go to designspiration.net. That's one of my favorite websites when it comes to visual sort of images, layouts, and things like that. If I was to type in layout, you have hundreds and hundreds of different options that you could potentially explore as part of putting a submission together. My recommendation is, especially if you're new to InDesign, don't open the software and hope that you'll be able to put something together. Instead, design your presentation on a piece of paper. Have an indication of what you may want to achieve through either looking at inspiration, such as images on this website, and only then bring up the tool with that intent in mind. Here's a great example that you can use in order to practice your skills. This here could be a random image in the form of a box. Here's another one there. The layout here seems to be on an A4 portrait kind of layout. It's a bit of text here, another bit of text, different colors, different size, and smaller text below. If you were to create 2 pages instead of 10, with a 10mm border, just as an exercise. Pick a random image, scale that image up, and try to simply reproduce that layout. This should keep you busy. You don't necessarily have to pick that image itself. Pick anything and try to reproduce it. And this, from my point of view, will be the best way to learn the software. And insofar as the tool's concerned, in order to bring something like that to life, it's your text box, it's placing an image, and it's simply saving it as a PDF as a required outcome. That will be the extent of which you will be using InDesign as an intro designer. And funny enough, most graphic designers only use those tools. Yes, there's some more complex, settings within each and every of those tools, but we will be exploring as we progress in this course. But essentially, those three things that we explored should give you the ability to put a presentation together. Something worth exploring as well, and don't necessarily recommend you go down that path straight away. First, to share my screen again, you have platforms such as Behance.net, whereby you can essentially search for, let me minimize that slightly, free fonts as an example. So if you want something slightly more artistic or fit for purpose, you can select something like that as an example, make sure that it's free, and that will allow you to download and install those assets for free. If you need some help downloading and installing those things, do let me know, send me a line, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Other websites that you may want to explore are DaFont or 1001 Fonts. Let's look at DaFont here. The nice thing about this website is, if you were to select this font as an example, it will allow you to have a bit of a preview. If I was to type in my name and click on Submit, here we go, that's the text. And if you're happy with the outcome, only then download the font. Those are things that you can certainly explore. Creative market, things such as resumes or portfolios or even presentations, you can essentially look for a free template that you can populate at any point in time. Don't go and pay $12. That would be just plain laziness from my point of view. If you like that layout, challenge yourself and try to create it without necessarily having to, pay $15 or whatever. There's some assets in there that would come in handy, but again, my recommendation is to look for free templates, fonts, you name it, and you'll be amazed by the sort of things that you'll be able to leverage, either from Creative Market to 1001 Fonts, or simply DaFont and Behance. Now, as we progress in the course, we'll be sharing more of those kind of resources and websites with you all. And joining a firm, I'm sure that you will be privy to a variety of assets that the organization will be using, including your actual presentation templates, fonts, and much more. So between now and the next session, my recommendation is, if If you haven't downloaded the software yet, start there, download it, install it to your computer, jump on your favorite website, look for a layout, and try to reproduce it in InDesign. Challenge yourself. Yes, you can buy a template. Yes, you can download the template for free, but there's a whole different world out there and a much more rewarding feeling if you were to create your own from scratch. There's a range of lynda.com tutorials. If you're working 4 o'clock in the morning, don't email me, jump online. If you're hitting a roadblock, I'm sure that your peers or other people would have in the past as well. So try to self-serve, and lynda.com is a great platform for that. If not, I'd be more than happy to do one-on-ones with you all as we're progressing this course in order to slowly but surely bring you up to speed. Now, I'm very well aware that we are slightly out of time, so I'm going to stop recording